We are live.
All right, Council, I would like to call this meeting of July 14th, 2025 to order with adoption of the agenda, and I want the agenda to be adopted as amended for the correspondence item 13C and 13D to be included with recommendations from Committee of Whole item 9A, and with the inclusion of a verbal staff report item 12A, potential deployment of Yellowstone Fire Department to support BC Wildfire Service crews in Los Angeles.
Just before we do that, we said July, I think we're in January.
Oh, pardon me, January 14th, 2025, regular council meeting. That you're making that motion?
Yes.
Thank you. And seconded by Councillor Palmer. And so that is adopted. Adoption of the minutes of the regular council meeting of December 10th. So make that motion, Councillor Palmer, Councillor Lucelle, all in favor? Motion's carried. Adoption of the special council minutes of December 12th. Councillor Cherry, Councillor Palmer, all in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Any business arising from the regular council minutes of December 10th? Councillor Palmer?
Thank you, Mayor. So it's just regarding the, on the regular agenda, on the speed limit, there was a discussion. So I think that was left with staff, and there was a letter. I think it's in the correspondence regarding a letter from the CEO. And I'm just wondering if we've had any response on that, the reduction of speed from the ministry in response to the CAO's letter.
Any response, Mr. Parliament?
Yes, through the chair, Mr. Mayor. The letter was written just before Christmas. Question to Director Black: have we received any word from MOTI vis-a-vis speed limits? Okay. We continue to pursue that. I understand there's going to be a meeting with some of the residents of Johnson Heights and other areas. But we now know who the new minister is, now that the cabinet has been announced this past election. So we just continue to pursue that, and once we hear word on that specific item, we'll report back.
And just further to that, Mayor Souls, so I was reminded of that discussion this morning, coming home from the cross-country ski at that intersection, and not a semi this time, but a car racing to beat the red light, not quite managing it. So, and so I was reminded, you know, I was thinking that, okay, well, in that particular case, these are anecdotal, we see this all the time, but is that a speed limit sign wouldn't have stopped that particular character. And so I'm just sort of wondering if maybe there's a place where we could have a dialogue with the RCMP on this as well for increased enforcement. I was thinking about Sycamore, so I think it's fairly well known when you're going past the Tim Hortons that that's a pretty common speed trap. So word gets out in those kind of areas if there's some more enforcement. So it's just some thoughts for consideration. Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Just in addition to that, if I can, Your Worship, there is a meeting tomorrow with MOTI that I'll be attending with one of the local residents. Would you like to join? It's at
I'll talk to you after.
Sounds good.
Yeah, okay.
No, we'll report back.
Great.
All right, any other business from the regular council meeting? Seeing none, any business arising from the minutes of the special council meeting of December 12th? Seeing none, I'm going to move on to Heritage Alteration Permit 101 6th Street East. Planning, who's Miss Shannon, this is your fault. Okay. And I've had instructions to go gentle.
Okay.
And my computer's just going to reboot again. I don't know what's going on here. I'm offline for a minute. Go ahead.
Right, so this is a heritage alteration permit application for the construction of a single detached dwelling with an accessory dwelling unit in the Revelstoke Station Heritage Conservation Area. The subject property is at 101 6th Street East. It's zoned R2 and it falls within the central Revelstoke neighborhood. The proposal is to construct a single detached dwelling with a secondary suite on an existing undeveloped lot. The proposal includes several variances to reduce the side yard setback on either side and to increase the maximum permitted encroachment for the side roof projections and for the rear deck. Staff have reviewed the application and determined that the proposal is in line with the policies of the HCA design guidelines. For public consultation, we did send out landowner notices to properties within a 100-meter radius, and we received one letter in opposition for the proposed variances. However, staff recommend that the HAP for the design of the single detached dwelling be issued.
Great, thank you, Ms. Owen. I appreciate that. Does anyone want to put the motion on the table and then we can ask questions? Councillor Cherry?
I'll move that heritage alteration permits be issued at 101 6th Street East for the design of a new single detached dwelling with a secondary suite with the following variances. Zoning bylaw number 2299. A, section 6.3.5 minimum yard dimensions to reduce the minimum requirement side yard setback from 1.5 meters to 1.22 meters. And B, section 5.9 yard exceptions to increase the permitted roof projection into the side yard setback area for a maximum of 50%, 60% of the 1.5 required setback. And to increase the maximum permitted deck projections into the 7.5 required rear yard setback from 2 meter to 3.38 meter.
Someone want to second that motion, please? Councillor Devlin, any questions for Ms. Hogan regarding that motion? Councillor Palmer, did you have a question?
Yeah, just waiting to see if anybody else is weighing in, but yeah, I have, thank you, Mayor Souls. I have a series of questions. And just further to your initial comments there, just a particular thank you to Ms. Hogan and the planning staff for the work. So I'm not going to be quite as gentle as the mayor, but it's not reflective on the people. It's on the content and community issues. So I do have a series of questions. I'll just start on the setbacks. In general, I don't really have a problem with them other than this is a new lot. There's nothing particularly special about this lot. And so I'm just wondering if I'm missing anything on the reduction on the side yard setbacks. And I'll come to the projection later, but just on the side yard of the 1.5 going down to 1.22, is there any particular thing that was special that's creating this request for a variance?
Ms. Hogan, is it related to the width of the building? Because this is a relatively small lot, 30 feet wide. If I can use old measurements.
Through the chair, I do believe that it's the size of the lot. It's a very narrow heritage lot, so I think it's just to accommodate the building on the lot.
Okay, thank you. So my, just through mayor to council, I guess generally, I'm generally fine with the setback reduction. Other than, it seems to me we're going through the zoning thing, and if we're going to just allow this, why be bringing these as a variance? Because there's nothing special to call for a variance, so it's a concept there.
So Mrs. Kovacs had her hand up if she wants to answer.
Okay.
Yeah, just to add to that, so the 1.2 meter setback was proposed in the, just because you're speaking of the draft zoning bylaw, right? So staff had proposed a 1.2 meter setback to recognize the heritage siting on all the buildings within the heritage area, because a lot of them are historically sited close to the setback, where they still have the larger front and larger rear setbacks. Instead of doing this though, it was deemed appropriate to have it within the heritage alteration permit to look at a case by case basis. And some of the lots are 50 by 100, 50 width by 100, and then the historic lots are all 25 foot by 100 foot. And some of the houses straddle those. So where you'll really see the variances within a half are for the 25 foot lots where they're trying to move the building. It was something that we proposed in the bylaw, but we did pull it out with comments from some of the new Heritage Conservation Area residents saying that the appropriate means is through a HAP, so to consider it as one application instead of blanket allow it for the whole area.
So just for clarity, then, would this reduce the, with the zoning bylaw, will it be established or will it still be the larger amount?
This would still require a variance than half of the bylaw because we did put it back to the 1.5
Okay.
with what's going to council today.
Okay, so I'll reserve any sort of comments on that when we get to the zoning thing. It seems to me that
Sure.
we should be dealing with these little things at the council table if it's not necessary. The second question is on the reduction of the setbacks and with the increase of projections. Does it still meet the minimum lot coverage?
Through the chair, yes, it meets the 40%. It's under the 40% coverage.
Okay, it's under the 40, okay. Because when I look at the, through the chair, so when I look at the drawing just appears bigger than that, but just for clarity, then the decks do not include lot coverage, is that correct?
Well, sorry, through the chair, lot decks are included in lot coverage.
It is included? Interesting. Okay, I'm just looking at it, but there can be illusions on that. The next question that I have through the chair, and this is coming to light because of some of the other developments, is on this, the pitch of the roof. So this pitch, from my eyes, from a lay eyes, and looking at the streetscape, is not consistent with the heritage houses and the streetscape. So I'm just wondering if there's any comments on that.
Through the chair, so it is a bit of a not as steep pitch roof as the others, but that is because of the reduct. They want to mitigate snow shedding with the snow stops.
So Mayor Souls,
Yes.
when I read the heritage guidelines, and this is coming up on another item on the agenda, is that that the pitch of the roof is important. So this is starting to look more like well, that pitch is kind of 1970s, 1960s typical pitch, and the pitches are 12 kind of pitches all through there, or even steeper in many cases. This, I don't believe, is consistent. This will look like a modern building and not fit into the neighborhood in the same way. I'm not sure that the Heritage Commission picked up on that, and maybe there's a referral when we start talking about pitches. Maybe there's a place where the Heritage Commission takes a deeper dive into the importance of pitches. I think that's going to be coming up more frequently. I did do a little tour around. I think generally, not always, but generally, the heritage alterations have been respecting the pitch in that sort of ambience in the heritage area. There's some exceptions for sure. But with being a new building, really the idea about shedding is more about economics, which is in part of our decision-making process here. There's other steep pitches that can contain snow. Notably, the post office is a good example that there was an investment courtesy of our tax dollars to ensure that snow shedding was mitigated. So that on the, I'll just leave it at that at this point. Thank you, yourselves.
Great, thank you. Any other comments from councilors? Councilor Lemon.
Your worship, yeah, just sort of a question arising from the discussion there. Some of the diagrams do reference snow stops, so preventing snow shedding. I assume the design is effective for that, so it's not going to come off there was a letter included in the application from somebody who put their residence as 106 down the road, and I actually used to live in 106, so I know the struggle is real with the snow shedding from those roofs after it piles up, 12 feet high in between the two houses. So yeah, I recognize the real concern. So my question is regarding the steep pitch, because noticeably it's different than the other steep pitch roofs on the thing. What do the heritage rules say about about conforming to that sort of pattern? Because from 106 to like 4 or 5 houses adjacent to that, they're all very consistently the same one. The one on the corners next to this to the left is a bit different, but is there like a range, and is this within the range? Because I see there's no variance here for the pitch of the roof.
Ms. Hogan?
Through the chair, so there is a range, and the range is between 612 and 1212, and it actually is at 612.
Okay.
This pitch.
Anything further, Council?
Thank you, Mayor Sauls. Yeah, just a further question regarding snow stops, and this is more of a technical question. I don't know if it's if anyone's available to answer this, but are there options for snow stops at the steeper pitches? Is that something that is possible for steeper pitches? I assume maybe part of it's also a height restriction, like getting into the height restriction with the 2 above ground stories. So what's the options available there?
Can you, Mr. Gibb?
I can speak to that one. Yeah, there are products available that do allow that are designed to retain snow for those steeper pitches.
Mm-hmm.
It is a very similar product. All it is the fastening is typically changes. The fastening details to those trusses would be changing to ensure that it can withstand that shear strain. But the products are pretty consistent regardless of the slope.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, Council Palmer?
Yeah, just follow up. So the 6 to 12 to 12 pitch range, is that, what's the basis of that range? Is that within some of the heritage documents, or what's the reference, or is it just sort of working material?
Through the chair, so we're referencing the Heritage Station, Rebel Slope Station Heritage Sign Guidelines.
Through the chair, it's under 11.5, building massing, size and shape, specifically to roofs. So it just references the roof slope. So 45-degree angle at a 12-12 pitch is the primary roof form in the heritage area, where there are other roofs that are varying slopes between a 612, 1212, and occasionally you'll get a very steep pitch of 60% or 60 degrees. And then for new construction, it does say to reference the steeper pitch roof forms or in blocks, the dominant roof form for new infill, consistent with the roof form throughout the blocks, and secondary roofs should be consistent form proportion with the primary roof form. So there's a range of roof forms there, so we do look at them on a lot by lot basis within the heritage conservation area with those blocks, and if it will fit in with the streetscape, walk along the streetscape if it's consistent.
So
Mr. Simon, do you have comment before I go on?
Through your worship, if I may, just with respect to application of the guidelines. I just want to note for council, it's important that you understand these guidelines are not intended to be a one-size-fits-all solution, and the terminology within the guidelines for the planners is incredibly important. The use of terms like should, shall, and may all have different implications associated with them. So when you look at the guidelines here, it will say new construction should reflect the historic steeply pitched roof forms of the area. Should is the key term there. If there was no leeway for council to say, yeah, a little bit less of a steep pitch roof, then it would be shalls. So should, shall, and may are really key directives in these documents. Should. So should you can think of as a preferred course of action. However, there's going to be situations like this where it's a narrow lot and maybe that doesn't make sense. So just for council to understand, these guidelines aren't intended to be a one-size-fits-all solution, and it does give council a little bit of leeway in certain circumstances where it makes sense to say a 612 roof makes sense instead of a 1212 roof here. Just wanted to put that out there for council.
Appreciate that. Council Palmer?
thank you, Mayor Souls. The issue of the pitch is coming up from the McCarthy House discussion, and we'll be talking about that again. And that's really got me thinking about it. I did a tour this morning, did a tour through the Heritage Protection Area. And noting steep pitches, the pitches of the roofs, and trying to have an understanding of how that creates this ambience. I've also had some members of the public talk to me about that, and some expertise as well they had on sort of understanding. So I'm trying to sort of grapple around that so that we're not having to do this every time. That's why I'm spending a little bit more time on this particular one. I note in the assessment, the staff assessment, building features and building styles, the point roof scape and slope of buildings aligns with the surrounding heritage homes. So those homes in that area, from what I saw, I'm not an expert, but you know, that 45-degree 12-12 pitch is a pretty straightforward, and that's the type of buildings there. The lower pitches occur occasionally, and they're usually buildings that were built later on in the. And it's interesting in the heritage guidelines, if it says occasionally the steeper pitch, that 60% roof line, actually they happen quite a bit. You know, the McCarthy House and those houses, they're that really steep roof. With the awareness of the public on heritage protection and how we're protecting the longevity of that area is important because it becomes a slippery slope. And even though as council does have leeway as to going along, there is a decision-making process going through that. It seems to me that you know, our responsibility when it comes to these is not to make it as cheap as possible, or else we would just allow where, you know, we would destroy the heritage area. It's to protect the community values as a whole. And it seems to me that it may be more expensive, but that's not my concern. That is that this should be a consistent pitch, consistent to the other buildings in that area. This starts to the ambience in my eyes is that this sort of 1970s is less pitched. It's a little bit steeper pitched, I guess, at the 45-degree thing there, but it doesn't have the same ambience as the surrounding areas. As far as the variances, and generally, I would be, so I'll just talk on the overall motion on the table, but I'm supportive.
Yep.
If these were broken out into components, I probably would be supportive of the reduced setbacks, because that does seem to be consistent with the heritage area, the tighter buildings, and with modern materials that the snow load can be held on the top of the roof. And our building requirements, we've seen those changes in the last few years, so we don't have to worry about having to shovel those roofs either. The building inspector will make sure those things are looked after. When it comes to the overall lot coverage, I'm probably fine with that as well. On the reduction of side of the setbacks, so we're providing stuff. But when it comes to the ambience of the area and the protection of the heritage components, those aesthetic values, I could not support the motion as it stands right now, allowing a lesser steeped.
Any other comments, Councillor Stepheners?
Just through the chair, from my understanding, based on Councillor Palmer's comments and based on Councillor Orlando's comments, they seem to be conflicting each other. If I'm interpreting what Councillor Orlando he said, is that the pitch of the roofs is increasing the snow shedding, which is increasing the pileup between the two buildings, which creates a concern for residents. Now, Councillor Palmer is arguing that the pitch isn't steep enough, and he wants to see a steeper pitched roof, which would increase to the snow shedding. So which one is it? Like,
Through the chair, I'll answer.
Yeah, I'll let you answer, and then I'm gonna get back to the motion on the table, because the motion on the table doesn't deal with the increase in the roof that you guys are talking about. So go ahead.
So Mayor Souls, just on the motion on that, I'll just speak to that to make sure that I'm on cue with. So there is an the motion is heritage alteration permit be issued for particular conditions.
Right.
As it applies to that motion, I am suggesting that collectively, there's an oversight on the ambience, which is around the pitch of the roof. That's what I'm suggesting, and that's how it applies directly to the application. To answer the Councillor Stapenhurst, I'm not suggesting allowing the snow to shed. And we heard from the building inspector that there is things with a steeper pitch that can retain snow. And I cited an example with the post office that's much steeper that retains the snow, so it can be held. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, Councillor Long?
Yeah, your worship, thank you. So, just commenting generally, with the heritage rules, we're all gaining our legs on them, as we learned from questions of staff today. The pitch on this one is within the permissible range, the 612. I do absolutely take to heart what Councillor Palmer is saying, and I tend to agree, having lived on the street, knowing that it's that repetitive form motion that is what makes up the heritage characteristics, as well as I do also acknowledge that that question is not actually within the variance questions in front of us today. I guess the key thing is this. With heritage bylaws, with any other rules similar to this, or maybe in the future doing design guideline things, no matter how prescriptive you get, no matter how much detail you put into these rules, there's always going to be open for interpretation, or there's going to be instances where you didn't account for that, so you have to deal with it. And then really where the sausage get made is before it comes to council, is how staff interpret these things and how they move forward. One quick question, if I may, through the chair, is I'm assuming that this is at the maximum height it's allowed at currently, or is it not at the maximum height? Because here's the point is, for example, in that interpretation, if they were allowed to get that extra pitch, you could probably actually put an extra floor in there. I don't know if that's what the people developing the lot would want to, and that would be an advantage. The variance then would be, we are over height, over the maximum height, which, that might be an option or something to get to, or might be direction through staff, or maybe it's amendment to the rules as we go forward. So I do agree with Councillor Palmer that, that seems to be, important value in preserving the heritage aesthetic of the street. And maybe what has happened is that in that interpretation has been like, this is the limit here and we can't go forward with it. So I'm not sure if staff know that or have any history on the background. I see Mr. Hofford is also listed as the applicant in attendance as well. He may have some background on that.
I'm gonna go to staff first.
Sure.
Through the chair, it's just under 10 meters, so not right at the maximum, but just under.
Mhm.
Yeah, thanks. You have any questions for them?
Yeah.
Good. Mr. Hopper, I'll allow you to make comments. I'm going to get through this because we have to go in camera here shortly. So do you have comment on?
Just briefly, I appreciate the chance to speak, Town Council. Your worship, we had careful consideration for form and function with this project, and of course, there's a lot of requirements for the form of a building to fit within the heritage guidelines. And so, approaching it from a sensitive perspective, we tried to fit as many of the heritage guidelines into one single building, which is difficult as well to also combine that with the client's perspective. And some of the things that drove our requests for the alterations is, to begin with, is the side yard setbacks. We increased the amount of insulation on our buildings for a performance directive and for conservation. And so that impairs your ability to create positive floor plans. So adding insulation into the setbacks becomes a consideration. The other piece with the form and function of the building is the eave projections, and a lot of the reasons for eave projections is for shading. Again, it's an easy way for clients to offer a cooler building for themselves in the summer by simply shading their roofs. So if we increase the pitch from a 612 to a 1212, we have to address further projections of our eaves in order to shade our windows so that we don't have overheating in the summer months. So it's this careful consideration of how do we fit a modern construction and design building that fits our step codes, but also fits within our heritage guidelines. So it's quite a riddle, if you will, to fit all those pieces together. And a lot of the reasons why we opted for a 612 pitch roof was not just because of the height guidelines, but also for the considerations of the future occupants of this building. And it's quite expensive to build currently, and as we anticipate rising energy costs and further focus on conservation, consideration.
All right, I'm going to briefly ask if there's anyone else who hasn't spoken would like to say something. Councillor Cherry, then Councillor Devon.
Thanks, Your Worship. It's great to hear from somebody from the building community that has some experience actually building in this town for why this consideration is in front of us the way it is. I do appreciate that. It is very helpful. Sometimes at this table, we forget that what it's like to actually swing a hammer and design a building. I'll also just make a quick addition that directly across the street, the house has the exact same roof pitch on their addition. One of the things with the heritage guidelines are, and what we have to realize is that it's about how do we continue to both save the current designs of our heritage area, but also allow for new developments with a similar design. Unfortunately, with our building code, it's quite impossible to hit a lot or all of them, but this building has hit a number of the guidelines.
Thanks, appreciate that. Councillor Devon.
Yeah, just a general comment on this one. I'm not an expert on heritage. I deep dove into it because of recent events, and I hope to never have to do that again, as it's not something I'm particularly keen on reading about. But if there is guidelines, and we know that there are, if there is a commission that advises us on this, and we know that there is, and the guidelines have a range, and this is within the range, and the commission is okay with that, and being in the range, then I see no reason for me not being an expert to try to step on both the toes of the guidelines that we have and the people who are experts on the guidelines that we have. So I'm in favor of this. Happy to move forward on the phone.
I'm going to call Councillor Palmer. Is it something in addition to what you've already?
Yeah, it's just a comment. I won't ask for any replies. So I would, I'm going to be opposed to the motion as it stands right now, just on that one point, and it's a bigger picture. One, I anticipate it's probably going to be passed, but a comment through to Mr. Hoffman that maybe if with their client, they could look at how to create that ambience from the street fronting piece. There's a heritage alteration that was permitted by, I'm not sure it was this council or previous, that also was similar in some ways. It was an addition, but they created treatments to create largely the illusion of a steeper pitch roof. Thank you, Mayor Souls.
Councillor Orlando, something in addition to what you've already said.
Absolutely, Your Worship. Yeah. So I am going to support this because the pitch of the roof is within what is permitted here, and we've heard that the reason for the pitch is also in part shading provided by what is allowed here. In future, as we bring these things forward with variances related to heritage, certainly I would also be open to the idea of it being a little bit over height to incorporate the pitch if that was what was required at the time. I think for the future, if we wanted to get more specific about what is allowed on what street and where that would need to go through a revision specifically, but since it is allowed within there and is actually not within the existing variance request here, I don't really see how it would be feasible to, or it would be advisable to oppose it. So I will support the variances as requested.
All right. I'm going to call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? No, Councillor Palmer is opposed, balance of council is in favor, this motion passes. I'm gonna do brief announcements and then we're gonna go in camera. You okay with that? All right, I just want to briefly thank the community and members of council and staff for their support during my illness. Appreciate that. Thank you, Councillor Lucial, for taking on my role here at this table, and Councillor Stephen for taking on my role at CSRD. I appreciate that very much, and for the staff and council who've supported as we've moved along. We've changed time for council meetings now at 1 o'clock. I'm going to allow 2 to 3 hours for council meetings. If we go any longer than that, and I'm finding that my body gets strained, so I'm going to ask for a continuance to another day if we get into that. So I just want you all to be aware. I think we can make decisions in 2 to 3 hours. Ready grants are now open, so those who want to apply through Columbia Basin Trust Ready Grant program. Businesses licenses and commercial utility bills are due, and they are due January 31st. So having said that, I would like to go in camera now, ask for a motion pursuant to section 90.1D of the Community Charter. Someone want to make that motion? Councillor Lucial, Councillor Devlin, all in favor? Motion's carried. We'll take a couple minutes to go in camera. As I understand, Ms. Delasella is going to join us in this room to take those minutes.
So, Mayor, so just for the benefit of Affordable housing.
Ms. Delaselle, we're just gonna wait for a staff member to return to the room before we reconvene.
Certainly, thank you.
Oh,
Go whenever you want.
Sorry, Your Worship, was that directed at me?
Yes, we're ready to go if you are.
Sure, I'll just stop sharing my screen. One moment.
Great. All right, council, as we move on, I amended the agenda. I would like to do item 13C, the applicant letter to council first, and then go on to D, and then go back to 9A. So Mr. Simon, with the applicant letter, just for confirmation, the applicant is looking for a little more information from council as to what council's expectations of them are. Is that correct?
To the chair, I believe the applicant just was giving a general overview, I think, of how they got to where they got on their design.
Right.
Any additional direction from council will always be appreciated, I'm sure, from the applicant. We do have the applicant in the room if you have any questions you'd like to direct to them specifically, but that would be staff's understanding of the letter that was provided.
Okay. So I actually may have the applicant speak when we're dealing with the motion. Okay. But I do have a question now for the applicant, and for item number D, we received a request for people to do delegation to council. In my mind, there's no new information in that delegation. However, what I'm thinking is we could do that delegation on the 28th and have a conversation with the proponent at that time, and that everybody could give their opinion as to where we move forward. And that gives staff a bit of time to move forward with the proponent after we put this recommendation from the committee of the whole on the table. Any comments from you, Mr. Simon, before I go to council?
To the chair, no immediate comments from me.
Okay, council, any comments on that? Council Palmer?
Mayor Souls, typically council meetings and public input, including developers, is usually contained through procedural processes. If we're inviting the developer to speak to council, I'm concerned about fairness, because we had residents that have also asked to speak to council. You're suggesting there's no new information.
So you didn't hear what I said. I would like both the people who would like to speak to council and the proponent to come on the same day.
On the same day, so are we deferring this whole thing then?
No, we're not deferring the motion. I'm suggesting we have the proponent come and the delegation, Ms. Robinson and her group, come at the same time, and we all have one conversation in council chambers at that time.
So just trying to understand, so the heritage alteration permit is in front of us today. So how could we be addressing this if we haven't heard from them
So
beforehand?
you've got your email, right? You've all seen that. Mr. Simon, so I'm gonna ask for some guidance on this. If I were to do that and actually put forward the heritage alteration permit with whatever we state, can that go back to the proponent and be worked on to see how that works? Or is that final coming from council and that's mandatory for them to work on? I'm looking for your guidance.
To the chair, so if council passes the recommendation from committee of the whole today, you've given your direction to the applicant on the heritage alteration permit. If the applicant is having trouble achieving that direction from council, they would work with staff and staff can inform council at a future meeting if there is a challenge and bring back the matter for further discussion. The question on whether or not you're looking to have delegations from the applicant as well as the individuals who've submitted the letter for council consideration, probably better directed to Ms. Floyd, I would say. But in general, staff will work with the applicant based on the direction that council provides. I think that the key here is what does council want to achieve? Have you heard everything from the public in terms of their concerns with this application? If you have, and council feels that they're ready to make a resolution to give direction to the applicant to change the proposal to address those concerns and then reconsider it at a later date after changes have been made, then let's get on with the resolution today. And if not, then if council still needs further information, maybe it's best to direct that delegations be had. Council gets more information from the individuals that submitted the letter of concern, gets more information from the applicant, and then makes a direction accordingly.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask for a little guidance. I'm trying to support both here, but I also feel that we've got enough information to move forward with a motion. Before I do anything, how do you feel around the table?
Mayor Souls, in general, I concur with you that, we've heard different things without hearing something else new. We've heard this stuff. And if we've heard enough, I guess then the question is, why are we doing a delegation for something that's going to be in the past? If there's a need for a delegation, it would seem to me that we need to do that, or this sort of almost quasi public hearing kind of thing. Essentially, it's what that's kind of starting to feel like, which could be opening up a can of worms as well. If there's a need for that, then I don't know how we can make a decision beforehand. So that's what I'm kind of conflicted with.
So is the rest of you comfortable with the motion on the table and we can make a decision moving forward? You're the ones who sat at this table at the committee of the whole and made that motion.
I mean, I feel like we've heard more from the public on this than we have pretty much any motion that's come before. I don't see that we need to particularly hear more. Like, we've heard it. It's not new information. It's been told to us since the voices have been heard. I think we're comfortable making a decision.
Perfect
Discussion on this.
Thank you for that, because both you and Councilor Palmer first and seconded that motion. So I'm going to ask you to put the motion on the table. There is the first one, parking variance, and then there is the second one. So Councilor Dublin.
I will move that the parking variance for this development at 400 and 404 Mackenzie Avenue not be supported.
Second for the motion, Councilor Palmer. Any further discussion on this motion? Seeing none, all was in favor? Opposed? No. Councilor Stevenhurst and Councilor Cherry are opposed. Ballots are in favor. All right, this motion passes. Let's go on to item number 2, heritage alteration permit. Councilor Palmer.
So I just want to make sure I get this right. That heritage alteration permit HAP 2024-002 for the rehabilitation and construction of an addition at 400 and 404 Mackenzie Avenue be deferred, and that the applicant be directed to amend their proposal in the following ways. Provide, and Mayor Souls, just as a side comment, I'm making a slight adjustment.
Okay.
Provide a steep pitched roof consistent with the McCarthy House over the uppermost story on both additions in accordance with section 11.5.5 on the Heritage Conservation Area Design Guidelines, that a maximum height of the additions not exceed the height of the existing dwelling as measured from the average grade to the midpoint of existing roof line to ensure additions remain there's a better word for that, sorry. Agree if I don't have it in my notes. I'll leave the subservient, but it's subservient, but however it is grammatically incorrect to the existing dwelling. There's a better, if someone could help me with that subservient, because it's actually a grammar thing, not important.
Okay. Second for that motion. Councillor Devlin, any discussion on the motion? Councillor Cherry.
Yes, discussed this year, Your Worship. It was discussed at the committee of the whole that the terminology was going to be pitched roof over the elbow story. Is now being changed to steeply pitched roof. A term that one isn't defined, and two not what we agreed upon. So we'll be in favor as written.
Okay. Any other comments? Councillor Devlin, Councillor Lang.
Yes, I believe we heard earlier today how it is very clearly defined. Or in the same guidelines that we're saying has no definition for the pitch of the roof. It's clearly in there, and so. Somewhere between the 12 and the set 12 and the 12 and the set.
We'll then use, if I can, I don't want to say retaliate for it, then use that terminology instead of steeply pitched. As per the guidelines.
I would find that personally slightly over prescriptive. I would think that there is a steep pitch in that there, but I mean, I don't think they need to be specifically 12-12 or 12-9. I don't know much about roof pitches, as we discussed before, but I think on the steeper side of the allowable, that's what I'm looking for.
Can I go back to Councillor Palmer for maybe clarification from his perspective, then I'm going to go to staff. And then Councillor Orlando, maybe I'll go to you before I go to staff. Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor. So it's just referring back to the committee of whole. As in my mind, the intent of the motion was around steep pitch. We were thinking about the aesthetics at that time. And that was picked up by people in the community, and I think that's a very valid point. And so we do have in there also in accordance with section 11.5.5 of the Heritage Conservation Area Design Guidelines. So there is, I understand there's interpretive items, but it's covered in that. So I think it's appropriate to provide clarity to the developer of what we want and what we intend, so we're not having to readdress this again.
Okay, thank you for that comment. Councillor Orlando.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mayor Sauls. Originally, I was just seeking a better definition of steeply as well, or any rationale for that. I think the intent is that it be similar to or the same as the primary building. So my question would be, following the subsequent discussion of staff, do we know exactly what the pitch is for the existing one, and could we define it as such? That would meet the requirements, for example, that other councilors have been asking for firmness in that definition. Is it a 612, a 7, whatever? Is that would the number of the motion be amenable to that identical? I'm thinking identical ratio, because often you want to have that resonance between the two roofs.
So through the chair. So the motion is consistent with the McCarthy House.
Mm-hmm.
Anecdotally, just sort of answering that, anecdotally, when I looked at it, it appeared from my eyes that there's portions of 1212 and portions of 1612.
Okay.
Councillor Statement.
Just a question through the chair to Councillor Cherry. Am I not mistaken in my understanding of heritage guideline alterations and how the national standard is to say that if you're adding an addition to a heritage building, that new addition isn't supposed to mimic or try to replicate the old look. It's supposed to stand in contrast
If I can.
Yes.
I think this is best directed towards staff.
Okay.
Personally, but.
Maybe a question through the chair to staff if they could weigh in on the heritage guidelines.
And then just with the comment of the word subservient, meaning that is lesser than the McCarty House. So it would be slightly different, but Mr. Simon or Mr. Gipp, do either one of you want to weigh in on that?
To the chair, I would actually defer to Ms. Hartland. She's been working.
Oh, I get to go, Mrs. Colby. My apologies.
Through the chair, so we just looked at it, it is a 12-12 for the current McCarty House. When you are doing infill in the Heritage Conservation Area, looking at the national guidelines, so looking at both the conservation area for secondary roofs, and I'm not sure if that's where you're doing an addition, where you're doing a typical secondary roof, is between a 6-12 and a 12-12. So you'll see the steeply pitched roofs in the back you'll see the back of the addition sticking out because it is not as steep as an addition. So if you are looking at something that's subservient or secondary in scale, you could specify a percentage of a pitch or the national guidelines, they look at infill for, you want to highlight the protected house. So if it's mimicking exactly, it is really key for whoever's doing the design to not take away from that prominent heritage house. So you really want to make it look like that is the key protected building. So if you're doing a lot of additions, you don't want to detract from that overall feeling of that McCarty House. So it's hard for staff. We're not designers, but we're looking at the guidelines. Are they meeting the intent? Are they meeting the design guidelines and the national guidelines for infill of around a protected house? It sounds like we've had the discussion with the community and council that it hasn't quite met the mark for the community. So looking at the pitch, and if council's looking at a pitch roof, there are percentages, or if you want to be between a certain 6-12, 12-12, or if it's just a slope roof, that can come back and try and work with what they've heard from council.
Council.
So just seeking a friendly amendment, subordinate. So
Okay.
subservient is prepared to obey others unquestioningly.
Yeah.
So subordinate is lower.
We can change that.
So I think the motion as it is there, it goes back to the developer. I don't think we want to be overly prescriptive on how they try and achieve their building goals. And so I think we're clearly sending the intent on that. So I would encourage us to support that and see what the developer comes back with.
Any other comments from council? Councilor Chair.
Yeah, I just want to make it very clear, I'm not going to support the change to steeply pitched. I don't believe anywhere in our guidelines it states that any commercial building or C2 or all of that states that these apply. I was in favor with a pitched roof. I thought that was a good compromise for everything. Appreciate that. I got stuck there. But as it's written with steeply pitched, I'm not in favor.
Any other comments from council? Councilor Orlando.
Yeah, your worship, council did receive, or maybe individual councilors did receive correspondence from residents. And yeah, one of the requests was putting focus on steeply pitched roof. And so, as a source of an amendment here, I think it adds some clarity, although it's not 100% clear exactly what the ratio would be. It does add some clarity to the intent. I think in practical sense, the concept would be that if it's a steeply pitched roof that would, and has a height limit, that would also mitigate the actual size of the building, to place those restrictions on the properties that are available there. I'm supportive of the wording change to provide a little bit more direction. However, just seeking a little bit of clarity from earlier, just procedurally, there was discussion of talking about this later. The intent right now is we're going to deal with this right now. We're not going to be addressing the letter from the proponent as well as the other letters from residents during this process. We're not planning to do that again on the 20th. Is that correct?
That's
Okay.
correct.
Yeah. So in summary, I would support the addition just because it adds a little bit more clarity regarding what is there. And you could make the point that a pitch, any roof is pitched, even if it's a little bit to let the water run off. So it adds some clarity.
Okay, so any other comments on the motion on the table? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Note Councillor Cherry, Councillor Stephenhurst are opposed. Balance of councils in favor. This motion carries. And hopefully, Mrs. Kovacs, this will give you something to work with the proponent on. Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to item 9B, zoning bylaw rewrite update. Mr. Simon, any comment on that before I ask for the motion on the table?
Your worship, staff are supportive of council giving staff direction to explore this.
So I want to make a motion, Councillor Cherry.
I move that staff re-examine the requirements for minimum frontage for the RLD1 zone in the new subdivisions.
Second for the motion, please, Councillor Lucial. Any further discussion on the motion? Councillor Palmer.
I just have a question. So we had a little bit of dialogue on the setbacks, and I'm just wondering if it would be helpful to look at that at the same time or not. So that's a question through to staff.
Mr. Simon, comment?
Through the chair to Councillor Palmer, if council would like to see a further reduction of setbacks, that's something that staff could examine once. And I know we kind of went over this a little bit before. We do see the reduction in setbacks on those narrow lots. We're hoping, because we recommended anyways part of the zoning bylaw rewrite, to pre-zone 18 of those narrow lots to the new LD2 zone where the setbacks are set at 1.2 meters. And if council wanted, we could explore expanding that pre-zoning to the heritage area, but to Ms. Kovac's earlier point, wrapping up a variance within a heritage alteration permit in that area gives council that additional tool and staff that additional tool as we're going through the process. And the 1.5 meters is there for good reason, because you get the spatial separation adjacent to two properties for fire code purposes. Once you get closer than 3 meters, you make 1.5 on each side. Then you're getting into, Mr. Gibbs can speak to it way better than I can, but alternative building solutions from a fire safety perspective.
Councillor.
Yeah, so I just have a couple questions. So, and I guess one to the mover. I'm not asking for an answer right immediately, but is this something the mover would also like to explore? I don't have a strong feeling on it, other than if it provided clarity. And I guess one of the questions I'm wondering is, we're trying to, through various other tools, including this discussion here on how we can accommodate the new ability for builders to build additional buildings on, and this would create that. And I sort of question why we would need to keep on bringing this stuff, this sort of very operational thing, back to council. A question through the building inspector or Mr. Simon is, if we reduce the understanding the rationale for separation and stuff, if we reduce the setbacks, then arguably it's more expensive, or they got to do something, but that will be looked after. Like, that's a decision is it not a decision the builder will make and say, oh, it's too expensive to go closer or not? And so, for example, on this one that we just passed, I'm assuming they have to build something much, much more robust as far as fire protection against the house next to them. And so why are we dealing with that? Whereas the builder can actually make a decision how far they want that separation, because they don't. So that's a question through, I guess, to the building inspector. Won't it be looked after?
Sure. Councillor Cherry, you want to weigh in before I go to Mr.
I could tee up Mr. Gibbs here for you. When it comes to this close to the building, to the lot line, it's usually a close soffit. It's not like a different material being used, and it's dictated by our building code, which Mr. Gibbs will much more adequately explain than I will.
Through the chair, yes. So the building code does have different spatial separation requirements, which means so different building materials have to be used, whether it's a fire rated drywall, whether it's a non-combustible siding, depending on how close you are to that property line. And then as Councillor Cherry alluded to as well, once your eaves are projecting any closer than 1.2 meters to a property line, then they need to be what's called fire protected soffit, which can be achieved through alternative means, but it would essentially, as you alluded to, again, it wouldn't be a ventilated soffit. So you would be looking at different ventilation systems on that roof, but it is achievable. I mean, we've told you before in previous meetings, anything's possible, time and money when it comes to building code.
And then if I can, with that in mind, I'm amenable to changing this to the 1.2 meter, because it's going to be dictated by the building code more so than council. Another issue that I do worry about is some of the older properties that are not currently on sewer as they come on sewer, or at least the empty lots beside them. If houses are built on those close to the lot line, there is a chance that the existing homeowner on the older lot won't be able to access his septic system in the future.
Yeah, my question that I was going to have was for the mover, whether they wanted to add that on. I would suggest that because it's just staff coming back with a little bit more information as to make the decision. I think the sewer thing starts to go into another bigger question, maybe we'll bring up at another time.
Mr. Simon had his hand up, so I'm gonna ask him to respond.
Through the chair, all of council, another option, what I'm hearing is that council doesn't necessarily want to keep seeing these variances, which is totally fair. And when we updated the development procedures bylaw back in July 2023, we do have the ability for minor variances there that are now delegated to staff. So the only time council's really seeing these now are in the heritage area when they're attached to a heritage permit. So another option at council's disposal is to direct staff to amend the procedures bylaw to delegate heritage alteration permits that are already delegated that include minor variances. And then it still gives us those tools. So again, just throwing that out there is another option for council to consider.
So Mayor Souls, I would suggest that we just focus on the zoning thing and go into another conversation. So if the mover and seconder are going with that slightly friendly amendment to add that, then maybe we can just move on.
You both okay with that?
Yep.
Yep, okay. Ms. Delaselle, do you have that recorded in your records?
If someone could repeat it for me, please.
Sure.
That staff re-examine the requirements for minimal frontage for the LRD1 zone for new subdivision, as well as side yard setback requirements.
Is that clear now,
Thank you.
Ms. Delaselle?
Yes, it is. Thank you, Your Worship.
All right.
Cool.
Any other comments on the motion? Councilor Lemon.
Your worship, just a question, if I could, through the chair to staff. Seeking the pros and cons of exploring these things now versus soon after we start get first reading. It seems like we're making some small changes right now, and I'm just seeking staff sort of input on what would be the best timing for pursuing these things.
Mr. Simon.
Through the chair, preferably for staff, after we get through, generally speaking, the public hearing where council has heard from the community, and directing all changes to the bylaw simultaneously, should council want us to pursue changes. My understanding of the resolution is directing staff to explore, not necessarily make the changes. But if council wants us to make changes, it would be nice to have them all kind of voted on one by one. And then staff have that formal direction. We go do all the changes at once as directed by council, so that if there's any cross-referencing updates, things like that, in the bylaw that need to be updated, we can do it all concurrently. But again, staff's understanding this is to explore it, so it might be part of a public hearing presentation, for example.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Let's move on to item 10A, zoning amendment bylaw. Someone want to put that motion on the table for me, please? I guess before I start, is there a presentation? Ms. Kovacs, do you have a presentation or?
There's no presentation, but staff are here to answer any questions that council have.
Okay.
It is what you have in front of you is a zoning bylaw amendment and a development permit for a multifamily building on 4th Street. It's looking at 14 units with a stacked row house. 7 on the bottom floor, 1-bedroom units, and then 7 on the second story, 3-story are 3 bedrooms with 1 unit being 2-bedroom. So what you're looking at is a CD zone that, with the draft zoning bylaw rewrite that council's looking at, that just looked at, would not be required to have the rezoning. This was a timing issue for the developer to have the buildings constructed for this 2025 season. So that's why you're seeing a rezoning in front of you today. Otherwise, it would go into one of the multifamily zones in the zoning bylaw. And then they also have the development permit for the form and character of the multifamily development in order to receive building permit should the council approve both the rezoning and the development permit.
Great, thank you, Ms. Kolak. Councilor Cherry.
I move that zoning amendment bylaw number 2404 be read at first time.
Seconded by Councilor Lucille. All in favor? Motion's carried. Item number 2.
I move that zoning bylaw number 2404 be read a second and third time.
Seconded for the motion, Councilor Lucille. Any comments on the motion, Councilor Palmer?
Thank you, Mayor Souls. I actually hoped to have done it on first reading, but that's okay. Some questions regarding development. So 4th Street, again, this has come up a few times. So we're looking at multi-use or bike paths along here, some improvements. Any comments from planning staff, or is this an engineering thing? And is there any requirements for the developer to make sure that it's consistent? We looked at something similar to this last meeting.
Okay. Ms. Kovacs.
That's okay. Through the chair, sorry, I should have said that staff did add a 6th recommendation to the report, that the applicant be required to demonstrate compliance with the required
Okay, thank you.
frontage improvements of 4th Street, just to capture that, to address any of the public comments and council comments on the traffic on 4th Street.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Mayor Souls. Yeah, oversight on my part. The other question I had another question on this. Oh. So I'll be in favor of second and third reading. When we get to adoption, we've gone through this last time. I'll speak to that when that motion will be opposed to the adoption at this time.
Any other comments on second and third reading? Councilor Lewin.
Just a comment, on the report as proposed and as referenced by Councilor Palmer there. Thank you to staff for adding item 6. The requirement that it coordinate better with the traffic calming project, for 4th Street and the also bicycle lanes as well that are going in there. It's just good to see that we can generate commenting at the council table and that be reflected in the plans going forward. Just really easy to do with open minds for this. So thank you very much for staff for adding that.
Any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, motion's carried unanimously. Item number 3, Councilor Cherry.
Move that zoning amendment bylaw number 2404 be adopted.
Second for the motion, Councilor Lucille. Any further discussion on this motion? Councilor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor Souls. You've heard it before, but I think it's important every time. We've gone through this process and been limited by the provincial government on holding public hearings. By rushing these things through, we are not providing that opportunity that the public had in the past to pick up on something that we maybe missed. I'm totally supportive of this application, but we should be giving a pause before adopting these bylaws, and not because of the application or the merits of this particular building, but I think it's a process that we're failing to provide the service to the bigger community, to provide their what used to be their democratic right to provide opportunity through a public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, Councilor Lewin.
Yeah, Your Worship, just to add to that comment, I agree with fully with Councillor Palmer. Nothing to do with the application itself, but just normal process is to do these through separate meetings, not individual meetings. Not all from first reading to final adoption at one meeting. We've done it in the past, I guess, for other reasons to move forward. But I would also add the reason there is a rush right now is because we need to wrap this up in order to get to the next item on the agenda, which is the zoning bylaw. I think this is going to pass the way it is. So I think by voting against it, it's not myself, and that's my feeling right now in agreement with Councilor Palmer, is not to delay the project, but just to make a note that moving forward, having that inclusiveness of understanding what people and residents want is going to be important. I think if we don't, we end up with just not goodwill with the community and feeling that there's a disconnection.
Great. Any other comments, Councillor?
Yeah, just make one other point regarding that. So on December 23rd, the Supreme Court of Appeal, the Court of Appeal, the Supreme Court of Canada did a ruling regarding the Vancouver Charter on a development there. Again, not on the merits of a particular application, but on this process. We might start seeing that there's pushback based on that case law in the Court of Appeal. It's brand new. And I think there's potential relationship to these kind of applications. And so hopefully in the future, we just slow down just a tiny bit and allow fair public process. Thank you.
Good. Okay. One last time. No other comment, Councillor Cherry?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Sauls. Just in, I don't know, unaligned with the two other councillors that have made comments, this mentality and this way of thinking is one of the reasons why many municipalities across the country are facing housing crises, because we had council that would continually artificially slow down housing developments. As we all said when we were running for election, that we would not do that. I'll be voting in favor of having this adopted immediately and trying to do something about our housing situation in this community. Thanks.
All right, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Note that Councillor Rolando and Councillor Palmer are opposed. Balance of councils in favor. This motion passes. Item number 4. So we'll put that on the table. Councillor Cherry.
Move that development permit be issued for the form and character of a 14-unit ground-oriented multifamily development at 1004 4th Street East. Yes.
Okay, seconder for the motion, Councillor Lucel. Any discussion on the motion? Councillor Palmer.
Just briefly, thank you to the developer for moving ahead and look forward to some more product on the inventory in the community. Thank you.
Any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, motion's carried unanimously. Item number 5.
Move that owner provide security for the due and proper completion of landscaping in the amount of 125% of the amount identified in the cost estimate to the city of Revelstoke in the form of cash or unconditional, irrevocable, auto-renewing letter of credit issued by a Canadian chartered bank or credit union prior to the issuance of a building permit.
Seconder for the motion, please, Councillor Lucel. Any discussion on this motion? Councillor Devlin.
I just wanted to congratulate Councillor Cherry for making it through that without assembly.
Appreciate it.
All right, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, motion's carried. Item number 6. Councillor Lucel.
I move that the applicant be required to demonstrate compliance with the required frontage improvements in accordance with ongoing plans related to the 4th Street traffic calming project prior to issuance of a building permit.
Seconder for the motion, Councillor Palmer. Any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to item B, comprehensive zoning bylaw rewrite project. Mr. Simon, do you have an overview that you would like to state before we start moving through this?
Through your worship, there is a presentation. However, it's very similar to the presentation that council heard at the December 12th committee of the whole. The only difference was responding to the recommendation from committee of the whole on reducing lot width. But more than happy to defer that presentation to a public hearing and give a general overview. But if council wants the full presentation, we can do that as well.
I'm all for the abbreviated portion at this time and then have the portion at the public hearing. Councilor Palmer, did you want to weigh in?
I just had a question if a similar presentation is available on Revelstoke.
Through your worship, we can certainly upload the presentation from the December 12th committee of the whole meeting with some of the minor updates we have there today. To talk about the scope in advance.
Thank you.
All right, someone want to start the process here with item number 1, Councilor Cherry.
I move that zoning amendment bylaw 2404 be ready first. Oh, apologies. I move that official committee plan amendment bylaw 2405 be read first time.
Second for the motion, please. Councilor Stephen. Any discussion on this motion? Being none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Item number 2.
Move that zoning bylaw number 2406 be ready first time.
Second for the motion, Councilor Palmer. Any further discussion on this motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion's carried unanimously. Item number 3.
Would it be prudent to have a quick synopsis before we move on? Because not everybody on the council was here. Probably should have done it in the first place, but just catching it now. So that's okay, Your Worship?
Sure. Do you want to do a quick overview at this point, Mr. Simon?
Yeah, happy to come up and just give a general overview. So just to clarify for council, you're looking just for general overview of the project overall, not specifically the resolution you guys are considering with respect to the OCP amendment? Overall.
Yeah.
So council, this goes all the way back to February 2023. We got initial direction from you guys at a committee of the whole meeting to kind of embark on this next stage of the zoning bylaw comprehensive rewrite that built off of amendments we undertook in 2021 to get some of that low hanging fruit, accessory dwelling units, greenhouse regulation flexibility, etc. So staff have been hard at work with the community over the better part of 2 years now. And the ultimate conclusion was a full draft brand new zoning bylaw on May 28th that was published publicly. We gave 3 months for the community to come out after an exhaustive public engagement process leading up to that draft to give feedback on that draft by the end of the summer 2025. We actually did give about an extra month for the latecomers to come in after the summer and give some feedback throughout September. October, staff were madly working to make some changes to the bylaw. We got legal review on it that we had to make some changes for. We did internal staff testing, dragged all the staff members into this very room for about 5, 6 to 7 hour sessions to go through the bylaw line by line, make sure that we have dotted as many I's and crossed as many T's as possible so that council has confidence in the process and in the final bylaw. We're very proud of the document that is presented to council today. We do feel that it is a solid kind of middle of the road approach where we're not proposing 12-story buildings everywhere in the city. We are proposing items that are in line with the official community plan. There are, I believe, 19 actions between the official community plan and housing action plan that relate to zoning bylaw amendments. 16 of those have been fulfilled with this project. The 3 that have not are related to density bonusing as well as inclusionary zoning. We will be looking at exploring amendments to the zoning bylaw in the latter part of 2025 and potentially early 2026 to address those 3 items. The reason why they aren't in the bylaw for you today, we were hoping that we were able to get them in there, but province changed legislation in April 2024 with Bill 16. We're still waiting on the details of how we implement that legislation to come out from the province. It was supposed to be released at the end of the summer. We're still waiting on it. So once those details come out, staff will be working away on those amendments. And what we really do view here is that we have a solid baseline document to provide much needed housing, have density within our zones that aligns with the density allowances in our official community plan. And with this project, what you guys have before you today is not only the zoning bylaw, but quite a comprehensive official community plan amendment where we are proposing to amend about 51 properties or clusters of properties, resulting in about 200 lots, give or take. That will have their land use designation changed to better match the land use designation in the OCP. And one of the big things that ultimately accomplishes, aside from some of the CD zones that we have scattered throughout the city that already have their development rights, if anyone in this community ever wants to build something bigger than 4 stories, notwithstanding the density bonusing that we'll get into at a later point in time, someone will have to go through an official community plan amendment as well as a rezoning application, which will trigger a public hearing, the way that we're proposing to amend this land use strategy. So to Councillor Palmer's point of how the province has kind of taken that away from us, it was staff's view that because of that being taken away,
If there is a substantial change where we see buildings greater than 4 stories, which this community told us as part of the OCP process, that's a big change for this community. They want to be part of that, it would automatically trigger a public hearing. So a lot is being accomplished with this. I will reduce a lot of administrative time for staff, but it's also introducing new processes for us to administer now as well, and new regulations that we're going to need to get familiar with, for example, bicycle parking. So a lot of goodies are packed into this bylaw, and we look forward to a public hearing, and staff are recommending that that public hearing be scheduled on February 11th, which is a regular council day. If council deems that there is so much community interest in this bylaw, which typically zoning bylaws are dry technical documents that don't elicit a lot of community participation, then council could certainly select an alternative date. I know Ms. Floyd has preemptively been working with our staff at the rec center to find some dates that could potentially work to have a larger venue for the public hearing. So staff are recommending that, again, we kind of go slow with this. First reading of the OCP amendment, first reading of the new zoning bylaw, direction for a public hearing. And once we get through the public hearing process, what staff are hoping is that any changes council wants to see, maybe you want lot coverage increased, setbacks reduced, minimum lot size changed, that council can bring those forward as resolutions, each one of them to be voted on individually, give staff that direction, we go make the changes, and we bring the bylaw back for second reading as amended, third and finally adoption. So any questions, we are happy to answer them.
All right, I'm going to ask someone to put number 3 on for me, please. That's what we said.
I move that council has considered what persons, organizations, and authorities may be affected by proposed official community plan amendment bylaw number 2405 pursuant to S 475-476 of the Local Government Act, and given the nature of the amending bylaw, that staff be directed to pursue consultation with the following groups: A, internal city departments, Interior Health, Ministry of Transportation and Transit, Mountain Resort Branch, BC Housing, Columbia Shuswap Regional District, RCMP, BC Hydro, TELUS, and Fortis BC.
Second for the motion, please. Councillor Devlin. Any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, all is in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Item number 4. Councillor Lucille.
I move that pursuant to S.477 of the Local Government Act, official community plan amendment bylaw number 2405 is consistent with the City of Revelstoke's financial plan and solid waste management plan.
Second for the motion, please. Councillor Cherry. Any discussion on the motion, Councillor Palmer?
Thank you, Mayor. So it's just a quick question with the all the development that's happening and potentially fairly dramatic increase of density in residential areas as it applies to this is on solid waste management. I'm not sure if it's there's that aspect, but also on sewage and water and infrastructure. There's that dialogue on the impact. That's one of the I guess one of the criticisms of the speed of some of the provincial changes is now communities are going to have to wear this. I'm just wondering if there's any comments and if that's directly related. There might be a financial component there too, but how that is implemented, there might be, yeah, just a high level.
The Chair, Councillor Palmer. So increasing density, right now, I think council probably knows development financing 101. Low density development doesn't pay for itself. They're subsidized from the rest of the taxes that our tax base ultimately generates. So increasing density is certainly a way to increase the long-term financial sustainability of the city as we're getting more taxes per capita without having to necessarily extend services and increase service levels at the same rate. So definitely it is something that is more of a financially sustainable model for local governments where we have this antiquated local government financing with just property taxes and user fees. And I would say that our team, Mr. Black's team, are in constant dialogue with not only individual development applications, but also broader community planning projects that we're undertaking. And I see Revelstoke as being in a very advantageous and enviable position in terms of all the technical studies and master plans that the engineering group has prepared as of late, so that we're very well positioned. Now, the key here is if development goes faster than what we expect, which is really based on market forces, the triggers and the thresholds that are identified in Mr. Black's technical plans and master plans that have been done might happen sooner than what was originally anticipated when we did the OCP as well as the master plans. So that just means constant reevaluation. And as we continue to move forward, all these baseline documents being in place mean that we can get really dialed in and get really good at what we do on kind of a site-specific level. So I would say Revelstoke is in again, an enviable and advantageous position, but it needs to be monitored and it needs to be managed as we go into the future to see what the ultimate uptick is after the zoning bylaw is considered and should it be adopted on the development trends within the community.
Answer your question, Council?
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Any other comments, questions on the motion? Okay, none, all those in favor? Opposed, motion's carried unanimously. And number 5, public hearing.
I move that public hearing be scheduled for February 11th, 2025 for the official community plan amendment, bylaw number 2405 and zoning bylaw number 2406.
Okay, seconded by Council Lucille. Discussion on that motion. So that will be internally with a council meeting on that day. Will we be having that in this room or having that in a bigger venue?
The intention,
Was
Your
here.
Worship, was to have it here
All right,
unless otherwise directed by council.
okay, Council Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor Souls. I think it's maybe a question that you have in the back of your mind right now is there going to be a bunch of people coming or not? Again, applauding all the work that staff done, an absolutely amazing amount of work, consultation. There's been so many meetings, those one-on-ones and little groups in each community. It's been going on for a long, long time, astounding work. So from our lens, we've done, we staff have done, all this amazing stuff and you say, okay, well, it should be pretty straightforward. There won't be that many people because they've had so many opportunities. The reality is that was just a bunch of bureaucracy stuff that they weren't interested until they suddenly realized this affects me. So Heritage area, we had 100 people plus say, suddenly we've got a concern here. So I'm wondering if the February, having this public hearing on such a massive thing is wise. Same day as a council meeting. I'd love for it to happen here, but I'm just wondering if it's wise. So that's, I guess, a question for council, for you, Mayor Souls. The other is if we decide to do that and suddenly there's people waiting outside, we're not able to accommodate them, will we be prepared to recess that public hearing and have it in a better place? That'll be a kind of chaotic if there's 100 people that are trying to get on. So just a couple comments, I guess.
So the other thing, Ms. Floyd has arranged with city staff. We could do it February 13th to February 20th would be ideal for our staffing at the community center. I have a selfish thing with February 13th to avoid that day.
As do I.
Yeah.
That in, if we could not make that day, if we're looking at alternative dates.
So would February 20th work for you?
Yes.
Okay. So if we change that, amended that motion for February 20th and we do it in the community center, and then we should probably alter the time when we know we're going to get more people, like an evening. What do you think? I'm asking for your comments from all around the table. And so I'll go to Councillor Orlando. Do you have your hand up, Councillor Orlando? Okay.
Yeah.
And then Councillor Stigler.
Yeah, sure. I think we should hold it in a bigger venue since we've involved more people in the OCP as well as zoning bylaw than can fit in this room. I think it would be a good gesture to have it somewhere else. If we're going into scheduling, that's a whole other challenge. So I'd like to know what time we're going to put there. I don't know if that's the intent of the blank in that space is to specify what time it would be. And a suggestion would be, don't push it back for February 11th. We could have a regular council meeting at 1 o'clock and then have it that evening as well. Take a break and then come back and for the evening. That doesn't delay anything at all. Same day, a little bit of a longer day, but
so
my
that's work with the community center.
So through to Councillor Orlando, the community center is not available on the 11th.
Nah.
Other dates are doable. However, they did indicate that both the 13th and the 20th were preferable. And our IT staff are also available on each of those dates.
So then it comes down to all of you as far as scheduling. So Councilor Staples, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was just gonna suggest, or, put out the idea of entertaining 2 times. Maybe one in the morning or afternoon, and then one in the evening. Probably a preference would be one in the morning, one in the evening. That way, people that, at least people have the option, of attending one or the other. And I know that's a little bit burdensome on the staff, but I think, in the sake of trying to address all the needs of the community, I think that's probably the best route, or,
Can you do that?
Through the chair, planning staff, we can definitely accommodate, but I would be deferring to Ms. Floyd on this, who is her game to organize the public hearing process.
Thank you. So Councillor Staples, the IT department does need time to set up before, so they need an entire day to include the setup and takedown. I'm not sure that that would work for them. However, we can inquire.
Let's inquire. Comment?
Yeah, just to add an additional requirement, can you please make sure that we're able to zoom in? I will not be in the country that day, but I would like to attend.
Good.
I just want to make sure in case anybody else has something conflicting and can't be at the meeting. Yeah, just want to make sure we're all able to.
Councilor Devlin.
I just have a procedural question. Can you have 2 public hearings on the same issue?
It's 2 meetings, same public hearing.
2 meetings, same public hearing. I guess that makes sense. So I was under the
Done.
impression that once a public hearing is closed, we're able to discuss it.
We don't close the first one. Go ahead. Yeah. Councilor Palmer, you want to weigh in on your comment?
Suggestion, but yeah, no, the public hearing, we have to be open to hear all the public comments, however long it takes, so we may have to recess. So a scheduled recess, I believe that.
I trust
Could be done,
the
yeah,
staff
but we
experts
couldn't
on
have
that.
2. It's too technical.
It's not worth it.
So if we do February 20th, can you check with IT and see if they can accommodate that where we can do late morning and evening?
IT has just confirmed that they would be available as long as they have the entire day to do their stuff.
Okay.
20th works.
All right, so let's amend that motion to the 20th, if that's okay with the mover and the seconder. Okay, and any more comments on that public hearing? Ms. Wood?
Could you possibly amend the recommendation to include specific times?
Okay.
Just so that we can let the public know
Sure.
what
So,
then.
so would I be being a bit of an optimist here that we can get through things? So if I said 10 o'clock in the morning and 7 p.m., would that work?
That is. You say 10 a.m. and 7 p.m.?
This is in February?
February 20th. So you guys give me your feedback now before we set it. If you want to do just one time, we can, but what's going to be back?
I'm looking it up.
Councilor Lucio, your comment.
Thanks. I do have a prior commitment in the morning. I'd be available after 12:30, but
Okay.
I can definitely make the meeting later.
Just a question regarding the 18th, because that's a Tuesday as well. Is there also a conflict on that day
That's correct.
for it being voted?
Yes, most of the MP3 or MP rooms are booked well in advance with programming.
Okay. And just a comment, I do not know about pre-scheduling a hearing with a break, so I feel we should double check on that. I know you can recess them for a further day. I'm not sure if we're.
We have done this in the past before where we've had the public hearing commence at the first portion was this time and we
Okay.
recessed and continued.
Yeah, and just because it was a suggestion from council, I wanted to double check. Thank you.
So I'm going to go back to scheduling for people, Councilor Plum.
So just a question, so on the 30th to 20th is what we're looking at. For some reason, it's not in my calendar. We have committee of the whole that day? No. Public Infrastructure Committee that day?
No, I think it's the week after.
Week after? Okay, so nothing. Okay, it's clear. Okay. Thank you.
I have a CSRD board meeting that I can work around that.
Yeah, the 27th is the public infrastructure meeting in February.
Is there, if I can, through the chair, is there a time that anybody would like to suggest? Anybody else, or any conflicts that anybody knows about? Or
So
should
if
just
we
get on the
do,
table?
let's say we do 2 times, would afternoon work for you, Councilor Stevens?
Well, I really like your suggestion about 10 a.m. and 7 p.m. because that way it gives people on 2 different shifts the ability to come, you know, whether they're working days or whether they're working nights. It kind of breaks it up. And then I think if we did like, 10 and 4, I think, potentially people would be in the same kind of conflict of schedule. And I think if we allow people the ability to go home, have dinner, and then come back out, there's always the possibility of those people being able to attend.
And so.
I was thinking of 10, 7, 3. That's what we were discussing.
And so just with my other obligations, would it be expected that we're there present for the whole thing?
No, your worship, you could recess, leave, reconvene at 7 p.m.
Okay, and so I'm asking that because I have CSRD, I can start CSRD, come to this meeting, start this, and then go back to CSRD. So 10 and 7 would work for me on the 20th. Go ahead.
So just for clarity, you would be there for the public hearing? For the,
But not for the entire thing. I would have to leave for a portion of it.
so
That's what I'm
I
asking.
think that's.
Sorry, did you mean after it was recessed, you would leave?
Well, after it's recessed, I would leave, but for CSRD, I would have to start that, then come and start this meeting. And then I would basically wouldn't go back to the CSRD unless they were running late during the recess, right?
So
clarification, I need to be present.
Yes.
So I would work around that then with CSRD and then make sure that I wasn't present for that meeting. And then, so Councilor Staples and I wouldn't be present at CSRD on February 20th because we have the public hearing. And we can work around it. It's not essential, so. Okay,
If there's no other conflicts, I'm amenable to put that in.
okay, put that in there. You guys are all okay with that?
Would you like it rewritten, reread?
Sure.
Thanks for offering.
All right, I move that the public hearing be scheduled for February 20th, 2025 at 10 a.m. and 7 p.m. for the official community plan amendment bylaw number 2405 and zoning bylaw number 2406.
Second for that motion, please. Councilor Lucia. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Thank you all for your time. Thank you, Mr. Simon, for getting us to that point.
Sorry, your worship, was that an amending motion?
Yeah, I was rewriting it out loud.
So could you call the original motion as amended, please?
Okay. All those in favor of the original motion as amended? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. All right, Chief Jarosi, you're up. You have a verbal update on this.
Your Worship, Council. So I just spoke with this afternoon to advise that we've been approached by BC Wildfire to potentially support the Los Angeles wildfires through a deployment from Revelstoke possibly in the near future. This is just putting out feelers, looking for departments that can support that. So I had a chat with Mr. Parliament this afternoon. I have the ability to send a crew and or a crew and a truck if we do get the ask. And so this is kind of a preemptive thing. We all know that the conditions are not getting significantly better there. There's new fires popping up, and we're not going to be in the front lines of the firefight. We're going to be just helping out. There's firefighters down there that are going to need to be cycled out. And I'm anticipating that we would be asked, possibly even this week, to send a crew. So this is kind of like an early thing before the ask officially comes to get your blessing, if you're willing to do that.
And so we're looking at potentially one on-duty firefighter, one paid firefighter, and 3 volunteers. Is that correct?
That looks like the crew makeup right now as they'd be available for that deployment. It'd be a little bit longer for the travel times that are on both ends of the 2 week, but it looks like 1 crew or 3 volunteers would be the selection.
And are we looking after all the expenses, or are we being reimbursed by the
We
wonderful
fully
state of?
reimbursed by BC Wildfire for that.
BC
Using the
Wildfire.
current rates, I believe, from 2024.
Councillor Stepheners, Councillor Orlando, and Councillor Chair.
Just a question through the chair. Would the city be at risk of incurring any overtime with sending one career firefighter?
If my scheduling remains stable, it should be all covered by the flex firefighters that we have available at this time for that.
Great, thank you for that.
Councillor Orlando.
Just to follow up through the chairs, is the vehicle the wildland firefighting vehicle or a different vehicle?
Through the chair, the current request is a little bit dynamic. They're not certain what is going to be requested at this time, but it's typically it would be a fire engine, a pumper truck. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Chair.
Yeah, if I can, through the chair. In regards to the vehicle, can you tell us about what happens if there was a total loss or any of that for insurance? What we'd be looking at, and if there'd be implications to the taxpayer here if something like that happened over there with our vehicle?
Through the chair, my current understanding is that with our ICBC policy, the vehicle while it's traveling and in use in the United States would be covered just as it would be with your normal vehicle, with your personal vehicle. With the authorization, the blessing of council passing a motion, that would give us the ability to send that truck outside of the municipal boundaries, which normally that's its limit, is the municipal boundaries. We have a fire protection agreement, so it extends to that. So this is where we need your motion of approval to send that truck beyond the boundaries. Your British Columbia insurance is good in the United States, driver's licenses and all that sort of stuff. Work safe, again, would cover the firefighters, their injuries. In most likelihood, if there was damage to the truck, we would have to cover those costs up front, but we would then resubmit that invoice, that cost back to BC Wildfire for excess damages and that sort of thing. Repairs, maintenance, and all those are typically covered by BC Wildfire if they're necessary, which is one of the reasons why we have to be careful about the trucks we send. They have to meet the exact requirements so that we can't send a 30-year-old truck because if it gets destroyed, then we get a brand new one, and so that's been played before. So we have to be careful about what we do send. But it's Kelowna sending crews, Vancouver sending crews, Penticton maybe. I believe Vernon is also sending a crew. So we're in the same path, same boat as all the other BC departments that would be considering this. So we're following their lead, if you will.
Follow up to the chair. Do you see any negatives in supporting this request that we should be aware of?
Just that I probably won't be able to go to town while they're out of town. So I'd have to stay here because of the need to support the crew and be in command, that sort of thing. So I'd be staying in town. I think the not negative part is the crew would gain a tremendous amount of experience going through that. It makes it a lot more simpler for us next time we get this request. And it also supports that experience comes back to Revelstoke to protect Revelstoke should something happen here as well.
Councillor Stepheners and Councillor.
And just by way of comment, I think that if our community was facing the same challenges as the community of Los Angeles at this time, we would want everybody showing up as well. So that's why I'd be wildly in support of this.
Agreed.
Councillor Lund.
Yeah, I'm happy to support this request. Revelstoke has a small department and a lot of force around us, and we may need the support one day as well. So I'm happy to support the request. And just a question. Is there any specific wording through the chair that the chief needs?
I've got a motion here. So Councillor Palmer.
Yeah, just a couple of questions. First one is, we had a previous resolution authorizing going out last year. Is that still in effect? So that expired?
Go ahead, Chief.
Ms. Blake, you must do it.
Thank you. Councillor Palmer, so that resolution was very similar to the one that is proposed for today that the mayor put on. However, it did indicate for the 2024 BC wildfire season.
Right.
So it's no longer valid.
If we don't know the answer, it's fine, but does the 2024 wildfire, BC wildfire rates cover our entire costs, or is it something less, kind of like what we do with highway rescue? We lose taxpayer subsidizes the provincial government.
That's an excellent question. I'm glad you asked that. The wildfire rates through the interagency agreement were designed specifically so that cities could send these crews out without incurring any cost to the taxpayer by ensuring that the rates were calculated to cover all of the anticipated costs for that. There may be a couple of things that the firefighters would have to pay for on their own, whether, like personal items, if they need to buy a sleeping bag or something if it's too cold, those sorts of things. But all the costs of fuel, the wear and tear, basically the staff time, benefits, meals, and if we were to send a crew without a truck, they would also cover the flights to get them there. That's my understanding. There should be no cost to the city taxpayers at all. In fact, it might be a small amount of.
Yeah, just a separate question. Community protection. So potentially our pumper truck going out in the event of sort of a regular fire like the Frontier. How is that handled? And I guess sort of around that, you mentioned you won't be going on holidays if this happens. And is there a commitment from the union as well that they'll stay put during that period of time? It just because we are a very small force, unlike Vernon or Penticton, which they also have joint agreements, and the resources are more immediately available between those communities, and we're a long way away from that. So I'm just concerned about community protection, sort of general.
Yeah, through your worship. So it'd be one of the two pumpers. We have a reserve pumper tender, which is currently stationed at the airport, that we'd bring that up to the station to fill that spot for the second due. So there would be a slight change in the trucks that are, say, running the calls, if you will. Ladder truck would still be in service. The first due pumper would be in service. We'd replace the second due with a reserve truck. The staff, say the IAAF staff are generally around. They may have some holidays or some time off here and there, but it is January. I don't think there's going to be anybody going out of town for any extended periods of time. We have volunteers. Obviously, it's January, so it's our low fire season. We could have a structure fire while that crew is away. I don't think it would make any difference. It would not be any different than the fire that we had at the Frontier restaurant. We had a very small crew respond to that, about half of the volunteers at the time, as well as we had just the two pumper trucks there with the ladder truck. So the makeup is very similar to what we had there, and we were lucky on that call. So the makeup of the trucks and the crew is not going to change too much. So I think we're going to be in good shape with the support from everybody, all the firefighters working together to make sure that this happens.
I'm gonna make a motion, or you want another question or comment?
Just for fun.
Okay.
Can we charge a 25% tariff? I'll rescind the question.
I might light a fire under.
All right, here's the motion. Contingent on assurance that adequate resources remain available to respond to local emergencies. Pre-approval be provided for Revelstoke Fire Department to assist the province if needed to further support the Premier's commitment to help fight the Los Angeles wildfires, and that the Chief Administrative Officer be authorized to approve at the time of BC wildfire request for assistance. Someone want to second that? Councilor Musil. Any further discussion on that motion? Seeing none, Councilor Paul?
Yeah. I'll just make I'll try and keep it really brief.
Why now?
Okay, I'll take longer. I'll be supportive of this motion at this time. Last time during the wildfire season, I expressed concerns and I was opposed to that. I hear a contradiction, like we're going through the whole budget process and we're hearing we don't have enough firefighters, we don't have enough firefighters, we don't have enough firefighters. And then we say, okay, we're okay. That just, there's a bit of a contradiction that I think needs to be just flagged, I guess. If it was during our wildfire season, we're too vulnerable and would not be supportive of this. And we see exactly what's happening in Los Angeles, and I'm concerned about our emergency preparedness. So I will be supportive on this particular one. And of course, we want to help. Of course, we want to help. And it's just in the blood of any rescue organization, the firefighters and others. So I will be supportive. Thank you.
I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously, Chief.
Thank you.
Leave it to you. Thank you. All right. We're now going on to correspondence. Interior Health request for special delegation. So they had asked for a special delegation to come to present their plan. Mr. Sims has sent me another request because first one was sidelined because of the election, knowing what they were going to do going forward. Ms. Floyd, their request basically originally was for a longer meeting, like 30 minutes or something, or a presentation of 30 minutes.
That's correct, Your Worship. I don't believe it's changed.
Okay, so we're talking about 30 minutes, and we were going to do a special day for them. And are you guys okay with that? Or do we start earlier or something and get them to present earlier in the day on a council day? And I'm not sure about your schedules. That's why I'm asking. Councillor Stapleton.
I'd welcome a presentation from them. I'd be willing to work with their schedule and come in on a special day if needed.
Okay. Councillor Lucero, comment?
I'm fine either way, whether it's earlier before a regular council meeting or on a special day.
Anyone else weigh in?
I'll most likely not be here, but I will attend via Zoom as long as that's available, whether it's on a council meeting, if we're worried about timing, I'm fine having a special meeting at a time that makes sense for most people or enough people here at quorum.
Okay, so at this point, can we leave that with you, Ms. Floyd, to see what works for them? And then you can let us know if you poll as to what's going to work. Okay, thank you. Okay, we are going to move on to, there's a letter here, short-term rentals. And at this point in time, we haven't got any definitive answers on short-term rentals. Anything, Mr. Simon, that you want to speak to at this point, or any council have questions?
Your worship, no comments from staff.
Okay. Councilor London.
Your worship, just a question of staff regarding the letter. I did respond to the correspondent, included the staff report that outlined our next step with this, as well as links to the YouTube video where it's discussed so they can get up to speed. They just said thanks for that and requested to know how to stay in touch. And I suggested signing up for the city's newsletter. So I guess my question of staff is, when we get around to discussing it next time, is that something that we will appraise community members of through the email newsletter, such as the reports coming to council or something like that, just so that they can, somebody who has expressed interest in being in the loop can have a surefire way of being in the loop by just opening that email once every 2 weeks.
If that's something that Director Simon would like included on the newsletter, absolutely, we can do that.
Your worship, yeah, we're hoping that in February, that'll be the big launch of the short-term rental project as we move through the zoning bylaws. So probably targeting end of February for a public info meeting as the real big kickoff. And then advertising, newsletter, blasts, and talk Revelstoke page launch before that in February.
Great.
Yeah, that's great. And just my point is, in this day and age, social media is fragmenting. People are all over the place. People follow this and that thing. I always think of the email newsletter as a communication tool where where you're going to catch the information that you need. It's an opportunity for people to sign up. And so I would just like this and other similar things to be a reliable place to find the information. Because honestly, myself, I miss lots of things just because I'm on this channel or that channel. Whether not specifically city stuff, but all kinds of other things happening in the community.
Moving on to communications. Letter to Ministry of Transportation Infrastructure, so our CAO has penned a letter. Do you want to comment on that at all? And otherwise, we'll talk about this is going to be, I'll get Mr. Simon to weigh in because the proponent will need to do some work.
No, just quickly, I think the letter's self-explanatory. The letter was written with the assistance of Director Black to convey to the public that we at the staff level are aware of the issues, that we do support what is generally been asked to Modi from on behalf of not only residents, but concerned proponents in the community. We are looking forward to working with the new minister. And in fact, we do meet with our newly elected MLA. This is a topic we will be discussing. So it's just to convey to the public that we're on top of this. And I know I've received some phone calls to make sure that staff are aware of the general concerns of Highway 1 and that particular intersection. So I think it's quite self-explanatory.
Good, thank you. Councilor Chair.
Just in addition to that, bit of a plug to the chair. I'll be attending the 12 o'clock meeting with Modi tomorrow. If anybody else would like to join from this council, let me know. We're meeting 30 minutes beforehand to coordinate a pitch. So.
Okay. And then Mr. Simon, moving forward with the proponent that's building up there, there's some requirements for him to do this work on the highway in Oak Drive. And that probably will come sooner than later, is that correct?
Through your worship, yes, sir. They've begun work on their subdivision and they are not allowed to actually register the subdivision. So if you go up there, you'll see some works are being installed under the direction of Director Black and Works and Services Agreement issued. But they cannot actually record the lots, register the subdivision until those highway improvements are done.
Great. Okay, thank you for that. And moving on to Public Infrastructure Committee minutes, Councilor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor Souls. No specific recommendations coming back to council. However, there's good work that was happening, specifically on the traffic calming. Staff are working on presenting some plans to deal with the traffic calming on 4th. So that's coming along nicely. And with these new developments coming on, including the affordable housing, hopefully they'll get integrated into those designs so that it becomes more cost effective. There is work in the proposed 2025 budget on there as well. There was discussion regarding public works. They had a study on their needs there. We basically determined it's premature to be started pushing down that. There's other review that needs to be done as it applies to our multi-purpose building and lands and where that belongs. So it would be a mistake to start building new buildings before we know what the master plan is. And then an interesting item that will be coming back, not anything initiated, but it's on commercial composting. So there's definitely an interest on how do we get commercial compact composting. And there's a potential leadership piece that the city could have on that, but we need to get the regular composting happening first, and whether that could be expanded to commercial. It's a problem. So right now it's a big problem for the commercial area. And then also we're sending all this good material just to be landfilled, which is a real shame. Sure. And it's low hanging fruit as far as environmental initiatives. So I hope that will be able to continue moving that along. Thank you.
Questions from the press. So we did have a member of the press here, I think, and they have now departed. So Ms. Delasal, do we have any questions online from the press?
We have no questions from the press, Your Worship.
All right. So Council, I'd like to move back in camera pursuant to section 90.1A of the community charter. So we'll make that motion. Councilor Devlin, Councilor Lucia, all in favor? Motion's carried. We'll go in camera. We'll take a 5-minute break.